This sort of Marxism and feminism ultimately boils down to control. It's the difference between the people who want to control you and the people who believe that you can make better decisions for yourself. The people who believe that independence and entrepreneurship and all of those self-sufficient values, the values that made America wonderful, the values that made America the best country around. It is the best country around. They believe that all of these things are wrong, and that the best way to organize society is for someone somewhere else to tell you what to do. And in that respect, they're no different than any other branch of the left. The problem is that they come up with these things like affirmative consent. Does anyone know what affirmative consent is? No, it hasn't quite reached Alabama, thank God. It's this sort of weird Orwellian kind of thing. That, it's basically the joke is, you have to sort of ask for consent between every thrust. Can you imagine anything more awful? Any more of a boner shrinker than somebody getting out a contract or an app? There's an app for it now. There's a consent app. What have I given permission for you to do to me? Yes, yes, yes. Maybe, and can we do this? Sex is supposed to be exciting and dangerous and sometimes confusing. And hope to be confusing some of you later. Just kidding, I'm just kidding. It's supposed to be something, ill-defined, something messy, something complicated. And university is where you find out what you're into, who you're into, what you want to do with your body parts. And feminists want to sort of control all of this and inevitably and always come down on the male side of the equation as oppressor and abuser and rapist. It's a remarkable, remarkable way of looking at the world. Seems to me, just because feminists can't get any sex and want the rest of us therefore not to have any either, we shouldn't necessarily take very much of what they say seriously, particularly when they refuse to give men fair trials. Colleges now are instituting kangaroo courts where the burden of evidence seems to boil down to, does she say he did it? And that's really all that some universities require to destroy a man's reputation by ejecting him from his course or sending him to another college entirely. When men are being told that they will be labeled harassers for approaching women in bars or abusers for some sort of drunken misunderstanding, we create a situation where men start to get a bit sick of women entirely. That appears, in fact, to be happening, and there's only one logical course of action. That is retreat. I call it... Isn't she lovely? I call it the Sexodus, and I wrote an article about this that was shared millions of times a little while ago. The rise of feminism has fatally coincided with the rise of video games, internet porn, and sex robots. The sex robots are definitely coming, and with all these options available and the growing perils of real-world relationships, men are simply walking away. And this is happening. If you look at the data, the sort of everyday sexism project that encourages women to, complain when someone wolf whistles them in the street. And the media is obsessed with this thing. They used to write about it all the time. You compare the searches for that to the searches for MGTOW, men going their own way, men who basically are so sick of the fake allegations, the structural unfairness built into the legal system, the lies told to and about them by the media, the endless sociopathic, miserable treatment of men in the media. Masculinity so fragile. I bathe in male tears. All these phrases you see from progressive journalists. So they're basically giving up. Now, they call this, I coined this word, the Sexodus, and it was a huge success. Men who retreat, by the way, are not necessarily the biggest victims, because men can deal relatively well without women, believe it or not. Not by being fags. That's not what I mean, although that works fine too. No, men in their 30s can retreat into porn and video games. Excuse me. It's Rubio. Retreat into porn and video games and each other's company in sports and things like that without too much trouble. And they can, see women now and again, visit prostitutes, whatever. Women in their 30s, on the other hand, well, we all know that single woman in her 30s, don't we? The Lenas, the Amys, we can go on. women don't deal as well. Some people will be offended by that claim, but it is true. When they are alone later in their lives. And feminism is undoubtedly pushing the sexes apart. There's no question about it. Alienating men and women from one another. We should worry everybody. It should worry everybody. And it's one of the reasons birth rates are collapsing. You know, if you take out immigrant birth rates, if you exclude, you know, whether it's Hispanics or Muslims or whatever, if you take them out, Western birth rates are just as bad as Japan, which is, you know, going through the floor. I mean, 4 generations, there won't be any Japanese people left. We have a problem with this. We have a problem with the sexes being driven apart. My contention, my suggestion to you is that feminism is the primary architect of that. And of course, beyond the sexodus, some men are retreating into slightly horrendous other things. We have produced another pathetic, monstrous creature as a result of this phenomenon, known as the male feminist. This is about the most depressingly hilarious creation of modern life. A man who hates himself and his fellow man so much that he will say and do and believe literally anything that some dumpy, fat lesbian blogger tells him because he thinks he might get laid. Well, I can tell you the best these guys ever get is an unsatisfying handy in the back of a car. Women don't want this. They don't. Even those eyes, but they don't. They don't. Now, you're unlikely to get laid if you're part of the sexodus, but celibacy is practically guaranteed as a male feminist. Which might be why so many of them turn out to either be virgins, perverts, or both. True. Recognize these guys? Now, I should say, Jian Ghomeshi was cleared of rape, but he is still creepy and does still have some weird fetishes. He just didn't actually rape. Apparently, the weird things he's into were consensual, but of course, there's Trudeau, which we'll pass over Justin Trudeau. We'll leave him. There's another aspect of feminism that is very negative for men, which I will only briefly touch on because a lot of the men in this room are young, and therefore you consider yourselves invincible, I'm sure. If you get cancer as you age, the medical establishment's kowtowing to feminism will probably finish you off. Women's cancer, like breast cancer, has a very similar mortality rate to prostate cancer. But although women's cancers and breast cancer stuff are widely publicized, you can't go anywhere without seeing those pink ribbons in your face, a Breitbart analysis of NPR's website showed, and this is typical, I mean, this is a typical public sector broadcaster, horribly skewed towards one side of the sex divide. There are 2.8 times as many stories about female cancers as male cancers, so they get all of the press. Now, breast cancer in particular gets a lot of press, mainly because it involved tits. No, Eunice, it's something that both men and women can get behind, or in front of, or under. But this is the sort of split you're likely to see. But it is not the publicity that will kill you. It is the funding gap, and the funding gap is quite extraordinary. So if you look at the annual deaths between breast cancer and prostate cancer, they're about the same, not too different. But then you go over here and you look at the funding per case of breast cancer versus prostate cancer. And you see how much sexier women's cancers are. Now, on the one hand, sure, we should be a compassionate and loving society that takes care of our women folk. And on the one hand, maybe it's right that we spend more on women's cancers. But it isn't fair to say, you know, in this era of equality where women bark at you for opening the door, they do, because they're so confused. They get so many messages about how it's appropriate to behave or not behave. It isn't fair to say that there is a patriarchy, a structural set of injustices that are keeping women down and prioritizing men, when every man's actual life experience shows exactly the opposite. 97% of workplace fatalities are male, because men do all the difficult, dirty, dangerous jobs. If you want to go into a STEM subject when you graduate, you have a 2-to-1 advantage just being a woman, because everyone's desperate to hire women. And there's this. And all sorts of other things. You know, men pay way more into the tax system, women take way more out. So if there's a patriarchy, it's not doing a very good job. It isn't doing a very good job for men at all. Now, these are real gender gaps, not the illusory fake gender gaps that you're encouraged to believe in at college. There is no wage gap after you leave. the campus rape culture epidemic is a complete myth. So what do we think? What are we going to do about it? Compulsory chemo for self-described feminists? Maybe that's too much to hope for, although you do lose a lot of weight. We might be doing them a favor. Feminists constantly beg for money, especially on social media, through Kickstarter projects that very rarely seem ever to be completed. Well, unlike those parasites, cancer sufferers do deserve your donations, so if you do want to give money to cancer, I recommend the Prostate Cancer Foundation. Now, the fact that feminism is destructive to young men isn't surprising, but what may be surprising to the average listener is the second stage of feminist cancer, and this is the important one, and this is how feminism makes life worse for women. Made life particularly bad for these two women. They, in turn, have made life bad for the rest of us. All of us. Let's hope he does get elected, and she does have to move to fucking Canada. Just go! Just go! It's interesting, they pander and mollycoddle to radical Islam, but they never volunteer to move to Mosul, or Damascus, or Lahore. Speaking of Lena, do you know what? We'll say fat shaming for a minute. Did you see my fat shaming talk? Did you watch that? Some of you see that? I went as my drag persona, Ivana Wall. I think I look nice as a girl. I think I do.